Slow reps don't produce more muscle growth.
Such a stretch. Holy shit.
Now, first off, Eric Janicki is much bigger than I am. So what the hell do I know, okay? I'm going to give you my personal experience. Having utilized extremely slow negatives like this, emphasizing the stretch, and then moving away from it and seeing way better results. Gave it a good go, didn't personally work for me. And I think there's a couple things you got to consider for yourself. First off, Eric knows his stuff, understands his anatomy really well. His technique that he's doing is phenomenal. He's got way better mobility than me. And he's a massive dude, okay? But does that mean that everybody should be using, 8-second negatives holding the stretch to produce muscle growth? I don't necessarily think so. And I think what you need to think about is the trade-off between mind-muscle connection or muscle activation that you're going to get better with a slower tempo and progressive overload. How do you track your progress if you're doing an 8-second negative? I know I can't, because how do I keep that form consistent? That each rep takes 8 seconds, 9 seconds, 10 seconds. If I'm trying to add an additional rep and then eventually more weight, it becomes really difficult to measure that from 1 week to the next, because your tempo has to be perfectly consistent. And there's a huge bandwidth for error. If you speed up from an 8-second negative to a 7-second negative, you might get an extra rep, but you didn't actually get stronger. And the reason I think this is important is that in my personal experience, I saw tracking your strength and finding some way to progress it to be the primary contributor of additional muscle growth. And now people are going to say that's produced from mechanical tension, which then leads to strength. It's not strength that leads to the mechanical tension that leads to growth. Either way, almost never seeing substantial muscle growth if I'm not getting stronger. And although you will get better activation, certainly, if you go super slow and you sink into a deep stretch, your mind-muscle connection will be enhanced. But is that going to be the primary driver of additional muscle growth over time? In my personal experience, no. Having done that, having milked the eccentric and inflicted additional pain and suffering on myself, which Eric, he's a sucker for that shit. And kudos to him. I love it. But I was pretty plateaued and stuck. And once I started speeding up my tempo, using some explosiveness, my strength started progressing and my muscle size, muscle gain started progressing drastically. And it was the only real thing I changed. Not saying you can't still use a slow tempo. Sometimes I do, and it is still useful for developing your mind-muscle connection. If you're brand new to the gym, you're going to grow from anything. And if you have high intensity and you're consistent, you're going to grow from anything. So if you do a slower tempo, it'll work. But over time, once you've done that slower tempo and you've got a good mind-muscle connection, I think you're leaving gains on the table. I was, from staying attached to the feel of the movement is producing muscle growth, rather than let's keep the feel consistent or the tempo consistent at a normal-ish cadence, 2 seconds up, 1 second down, or something like that. And I'm going to focus on trying to get stronger, adding additional reps, tracking my workouts, being super diligent and focused on that. I saw that to disproportionately lead to way more muscle growth in my personal experience. I'm just one person. I'm just adding my take here, okay? Where I do think these slow negatives are going to be extremely beneficial is if you haven't developed a solid mind-muscle connection and you don't understand your anatomy and you don't know what it feels like to have the target muscle working, which is a lot of people. Then I think doing some of your sets with a really slow tempo so you can actually feel that mind-muscle connection. For example, biceps, if you're lowering the weight slowly and you're coming to a full deep stretch at the bottom where your elbow's straight, you feel that muscle burning and you come up under control, you hold that squeeze and you think about the muscle lengthening and contracting, that's a tool or a skill you're developing. If you speed that rep up, so you're coming up 1 second, down 1 second, it's much harder to have your mind-muscle connection strong. So I think, to me, the primary benefit of slower reps, emphasizing the stretch, is to enhance your ability to have a good mind-muscle connection so that when you use a more normal tempo that is much more conducive to progressive overload and getting stronger, you do get more activation out of those movements. If you're just chucking weight around, you don't really have a good mind-muscle connection. This is my opinion. There's a million different ways to train, right? And if you're consistent and you have really high intensity and you find some way to progress, you're going to grow. The main issue that I saw was it was almost impossible for me to have some tangible, trackable way of progress, milking the eccentric just in the battlefield of muscle burn and slow control. Like I don't know when the set. It's when my pain tolerance runs out is when the set ends. From week to week, month to month, like years plus of that, I'm not getting any stronger. And I'm getting an insane burn. I'm getting great pumps. I'm getting great mind-muscle connection. I'm not getting stronger, and I'm not getting bigger. And that's like later in my lifting journey when I'd already been through the newbie gains. Again, it's not like you're not going to see growth from this. And everybody is individual. I'm not saying don't try it, but I want you to think about the pros versus cons, the trade-off. Where if you bias a lifting style like this to get better activation and stimulation, stretch of the muscle, the thing you're giving up is biasing progressive overload. And in my opinion, the two are both important. You want to have some mind-muscle connection and control and understand the muscle and feel it stretching and contracting, but you also want to have your training structured so that you can progress. And over 15 years of training, anytime I wasn't progressing the strength or maybe adding some additional sets or increasing the frequency, I wasn't progressing the stimulus in those ways, I never saw meaningful muscle growth. So if you're stuck and you've spent some good time focusing on activation, stimulation, slow negatives, and you're not progressing, my encouragement to you would be, okay, maybe you can give a little bit of that up and speed the tempo up a little bit so we can start biasing, getting stronger, and seeing progressive overload. And my experience, again, I saw incredible benefit from that. So it's useful to do the slower tempo to build that base, and you could still work some of your sets in. For example, at the end of my session, when I'm doing lighter weights, sometimes I go really slow because the weight is lighter. I'm not really worried about tracking. I've already, accumulated a lot of fatigue. The muscle is not close to performing at its maximum output, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm just trying to get a good pump and feel the muscle. I'm going to use a lighter weight and I'm going to slow right down. So it's a tool to have in your kit. But the thing I don't think is constructive is to see somebody like Eric who has an immensely impressive physique and is doing this very unique creative way of lifting where he's going into super stretch range of motion and he's taking 8 seconds to get down there and then he pauses and then he comes out. The mistake in my opinion is to think there's something unique about that tempo that specifically stimulates more muscle growth. And I've tried. I was in that boat. I tried that. So I'm just encouraging you to take something from that to go, okay, do I have good mind-muscle connection? No. Well, let me utilize some of these techniques that Eric or other people are promoting so that I can develop a better mind-muscle connection. But that may not be the primary driver of your growth continuously. In my experience, that's what I've seen. And so to attach a lot of value to the technique and execution of the movement with the form and the tempo, I think is a bit of a mistake. And I think a lot of people look like, ooh, there must be something specific about that tempo. And I don't think there is. I think if you could find a way, and maybe Eric does, to still progress the weight using that tempo, then I'm not here to say it's any more or less effective. But personally, I found it impossible to track because it's just so hard to keep it consistent. Whereas if you're doing like a controlled tempo, like I'm showing in my sets here, it's easier to keep that the same from one workout to the next. Maybe sometimes you speed it up a little and you need to do a form reset workout because you're not actually getting stronger. You're just speeding up the weights. Your form's getting sloppier. That still happens. But like a 1 or 2 second down, 1 or 2 second up, it's easier to keep that rhythm the same and then more tangibly know when you get an additional rep that is more concrete strength gain. Whereas if you're taking 8 seconds to lower the weight down, like you're just in a world of pain, just milking the feeling and the mind-muscle connection and the stretch, and you're just not biasing progressive overload, in my opinion. So again, the dude is massive, but I do think that this is the pros versus cons trade-off for you to consider, so that you can ultimately take from this and get more growth. And the last thing I'll finish with is there's always a tendency, I think, for people to put a new spin on fitness for personal monetary gain. Okay, and I'm not saying that's his sole motivation. Clearly the training works, but he's selling a training course, a training app. If you just come on here and say, we just got to get stronger each week and that's it, people aren't going to click and buy, because it's like, wow, that's just too simplistic and boring. Whereas if you give some novel, interesting approach, then it's like, oh, there's something that stands out. It's controversial. Some people think it works. Some people think it doesn't. And the average person is more likely to think, oh, there's something specifically beneficial of training like this with a foam roller and a slow tempo and all these creative tweaks. Some of it's beneficial, but some of it is to get views and sell a product as well. So it's something to keep in mind, which I will follow up by promoting my own arm program. I try to give you the straight goods of what I've seen to actually work for me. And if you are serious about muscle growth and you really want to grow your freaking arms, serious about your arm growth, it's just my personal log of all the things that I've found to work for me into a condensed course. So if you think that that's useful, then it could help. And I don't present it in a way where I'm trying to make it seem like it's something more complex than it is. And I think that hurts the ability to promote it, because a lot of people, they want to hear that. I'm here to just tell you it's like a lot of simple shit, man. It's not that complicated. Be consistent, train with intensity, find some way to progress. Those are the main things that'll drive your growth. If you're looking for a little more structure, some of the little nuanced things on my site I share, in detail. There's all these different courses that walk you through routines and stuff. And, and there's other videos I'm adding now that I'm on the enhanced side of things, that what I'm seeing in that, because again, transparency is key. And got the arms to 18 inches naturally. Now we're up to 19 inches and growing, no longer natural. And I think it's important to also talk about that. So in full disclosure, on my site, I'm uploading videos every day or every week, talking about exactly what I'm doing, exactly what results I'm getting from that. So you can head over there if you want that component of it as well. So ultimately, my message is to promote truth to you guys, to give you, so far as I see it, the honest information that I think will help you the most based on my own kind of consumption of things and different ideas and tips, and considering it as a possibility, applying it to myself. Here's my personal anecdote. Here's my thoughts on, what's good about it, what isn't. There's always gray area. It's never black and white. And hopefully this will help you to be able to make more progress. That's ultimately what my message is here. So that's my thoughts on, slow, really, really slow tempo and the trade-offs. It's bad versus fast is good. There's always going to be a trade-off to consider. So that's what you should think about. So hope that helps you to make some gains, man. Sign up for the freaking arm program if you want some giant pipe zaddy, some absolutely bulbous girth monsters, some big old ham hocks splitting out the side of your freaking shirt, dude.